really hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe, like, and click the bell to be notified of more fantastic music content just like this. Welcome to the Need to Know Music Show with me, Ronan McManus, here on Switchbox TV. And today I'm joined by an American singer-songwriter whose songs have been covered by some of the biggest names in Americana and country music over his amazing 40-year career. He joins us now from New South Wales, Australia. Please welcome Kevin Welch. How you doing?
Very good, man. Nice to see you.
Yeah, great stuff. It looks like you're it's nice and still light there where you are. So 8 o'clock at night for you, is it? It's 9 o'clock in the
Yeah,
morning here. But
it's just getting dark. My wife just took our 3-year-old out to watch those giant fruit bats that come out here at night.
oh wow,
Great wingspans on them, and this is the time of night they fly over.
amazing.
And we've been there, and they call them flying foxes. And so I've
Right.
been at the age of 3. I've been teaching him about the red flying horse from America, which is kind of my icon, my sort of totem. And
Yeah.
then it occurred to me, son, we have flying foxes that come over the house every single night. So you need to see those.
Yeah, absolutely. What an amazing thing for a 3-year-old to see.
Yeah,
So
that's where
this
they're at.
is this Henry David Sharptooth?
It is indeed.
How I read that name and I was like, that is a great name. I mean, that if he doesn't become a blues singer with the name Sharktooth. Right. So yeah. So how have you been? How's this year been for you? You got a young family, haven't you now? So, um, has that what's that been like during the lockdown? Was there a full lockdown over there in Australia? How's this year been for you, sort of personally and obviously musically? How has it affected things?
Well, I'm in the same boat that everybody else is. Obviously, it was a little bit more complicated for our family, perhaps because I left Australia toward the end of February to go to Banff, Alberta. Every year I head up I guess they call me artistic director or something of a international songwriting thing where people come in from all over the world, and we work with people for a few weeks up there. The Banff Center is a very fine institution.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
So, I left here and the virus was just starting to, rumble. And I made it to Banff, and we made it about 2 weeks into our program, and they had to close the campus down. And we all, everybody had to split. Uh, we still have the home in the hill country down in Texas. I went to Texas, and the Australian government wouldn't let me enter the country for the next 6 months.
Oh wow.
So I did most of my lockdown time by myself at the house outside of Austin, and we just spent a whole lot of time on FaceTime. And then finally they allowed me to come in here just a few months ago. In Australia, I don't know about England. I suspect it's probably the same, but they take you from the airport and put you in a hotel room, and then you're not allowed to walk out of that hotel room for 2 weeks. And anyway, I've just been here ever since, and um, I did what a lot of people that we know did when I was by myself in lockdown. I just started writing and recording, and doing remote recordings.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I've been working with a wonderful producer, engineer, guitar player named David Abeda there in Texas. And oh, there they
That's
go.
it. That's the lights going.
And just been, I was just sending tracks out to uh, people all over the world, really. Just my favorite players. Um, Actually, sent one track to Bill Payne from Little Feat, and Bill played piano on that, and that was a big delight for me because Bill's always been one of my favorite piano players, maybe my favorite piano player. I'll just come right out and say it.
Yeah.
So we
Amazing.
got three or four things cut, and I haven't let anybody hear them, but I'm awfully proud of them. It was a really interesting experience recording in that way.
Yeah, because this is kind of like what I've heard a lot of people go doing this, doing the songwriting sessions and recording sessions, and it's just been that kind of remote back and forth thing, which in songwriting terms kind of seems to produce different things. Have you done kind of like some of those songwriting sessions like that back and forth thing?
Yeah, and I had done that before over the years, um, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But trying to co-write a song with somebody sitting in a room with them, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just you get a different sort of array of that push pull thing. Just like the difference if you're recording in a studio with everybody together, um, the groove is going to be more reliant on just the kind of the human beings. There's a thing that happens when humans begin playing together. The tempo actually might be speeding up or slowing down just a hair,
yeah,
imperceptibly, but it's happening. But everybody's doing it together.
yeah, yeah. There's a breathing, kind of a breathing going on, isn't there?
It is, yeah. There's some kind of heartbeat thing going on. So when you're recording remotely and you have to start with, a piano vocal or a guitar vocal or something, you're playing to some kind of a click track,
Yeah,
uh, just so a drummer down the line is going to, stand a chance of being able to come in over the top of it. And so, it's different.
yeah,
You're not bouncing ideas. You don't have that musical conversation going on that you do in the studio.
yeah. I think
I think this.
I think there's certain songs sometimes can really, I suppose it sort of cuts out there's a type of song that kind of where the vibe just happens, and it's not necessarily that it's a amazing lyrics or that it's an amazing chord sequence, and it's just something about it that just works when it's played, and it's played together with people. I suppose those kind of songs are not going to be as present as they would have been because people aren't in the room playing together. So you're kind of more reliant on the technical content of a song.
Yeah,
Maybe that sort of song is going to be more prevalent being released next year.
yeah. I mean, there are good aspects to it also that you've got a little track going, and you sit around and you think, um, I know that saxophone player in Berlin. He would be perfect for this. Or
And everyone's available.
yeah, everybody's going, yeah, yeah, just yeah, send me something. I'm just kind of hanging. So you have that sort of luxury, and then they can spend as much time as they want. There's no, you're not trying to knock it out or anything. So there's good parts and not so
Yeah.
good parts. It's a trade-off, like
Suppose
everything else.
you can do your wish list. I suppose you can sort of go, yeah, just sort of tick them off. Right for this one, I'm going to have. See, this is my
Yeah.
dream team. Yeah, yeah,
Oh
that's
man, I've been so honored and delighted by the people that um, agreed to play on this stuff, and just and Abeta was, he's just been brilliant at taking my horrible sounding vocal tracks and just making them sound like it was, me singing over a great mic with a great engineer. He's able to just dig stuff out. So yeah, it's been very educational, and I have to say, pretty rewarding. And then the rest of the time, I'm teaching songwriting on
yeah.
Zoom like this, which is something I've been enjoying doing for the last 10 or 12 years. And and it's people all over the world. This week, I'm working with a lady from New Jersey, a guy out in California, a guy in Ireland, a guy in New Zealand. Um, and yeah, about an hour at a time, I get to sit and just talk to people about songs, which I've always enjoyed doing anyway.
I'd love to do that actually because I've never done that. I've been writing songs since I was like 11 and I've been releasing them and everything, but I've never actually realized from actually doing these interviews, doing these conversations, and I've spoken to so many people in Nashville, and it's just a way of life there. That those songwriting sessions is kind of, and everyone kind of studies the arts, and I've realized I've never really done anything like that, and it
Yeah.
fascinates me, and I'd love to do that sometime. So maybe I'll give you a call and we could do something like that
Oh, you
if that's
should, man. I mean, it's just interesting. I've been doing this for a really, really long time, and
yeah.
I'm still fascinated by these weird little things.
Everyone's different, I suppose, aren't they? You kind of everyone's got a unique perspective on, or has a, comes at subjects you've probably written a million songs about. You've probably co-written or guided people through, or written yourself songs about every subject that you could write about, but it's still something new. I mean, how do you find how what's that kind of like? Getting to know people. Is it kind of, is there a lot of talking that goes on first, or is it kind of down to business? How do you work it?
Well, no, it like you really you can't tell somebody how to write a song because you don't know what kind of song they want to write,
Yeah,
and it's none of my business what kind of song somebody wants to write. Um, but you can talk to people about how to sort of increase their awareness of what they're doing, whatever that might be. And there are ways to do that, and kind of diagnostic things to look at, so you can tell if you're actually doing what you think that you're doing. And it can be any kind of song. It can be just like some song just designed to make somebody want to shake their ass, or it can be something really heavy, or it can be a hip hop song. It can be an instrumental. It doesn't matter. Um, it's what we talk about a lot is just sort of, I don't know, for one thing, like remembering that though we may be writing this stuff, it's not probably going to be read.
yeah,
And when you think like that, everything shifts in your brain, and you begin writing so that people are going to be able to hear what it is you want them to hear, whatever that might be. But there's also a million different approaches to this. I was just reading a really interesting piece that Jeff Tweedy wrote from Wilco about songwriting,
yeah.
and Tweedy's got a whole other approach to it, which I appreciate very much. In fact, I've been turning my students onto this article lately and saying, okay, well, this is what I've got to say. Check out what Jeff Tweedy's got to say about it. Um,
Yeah.
there's a million different kinds of songs, and there's a million different kinds of ways to go about it.
Yeah, I mean, this is what it's something that I've talked a lot about Bob Dylan's sort of style to people, because you could just read his lyrics as poems, and they work because of the way that he uses words and rhyme schemes,
Yeah.
and there's no wasted words. And we talked a lot about that. But then there's something. Then you look at something like a song like Wagon Wheel, which has become like a massive, it's become a bind to a lot of bands. To be fair, it's one of those songs everyone's sick of. But I mean, that was his chorus, and it's just kind of really simple, really. It's just, and it just kind of works. But that one, it really works singing it. So I do, when I write my lyrics, I tend to try to sing them back to myself because that's how it's going to be heard,
Yeah.
and try to get it feeling like it's got a rhythm to it because of that Bob
Yeah.
Dylan thing of it just kind of just, he can take one syllable rhyme thing and write like 25 different alternate lines that rhyme with each other, and it's still a narrative in there, and it's just like
Yeah. Yeah.
crazy ability. And I don't know whether that's something that he just does, or whether it's something that he really hones over a long period of time writing songs. I mean, are you an advocate for any particular, like, it being quick and natural, or really studying it, or is it song by song?
Well, it is, song by song, and every song is going to present itself in a different way to you. Um, I, if I'm an advocate of anything, I guess it would be that I don't argue with anything at the beginning. If something begins to occur to me, um, we always try to kind of guard against early editing. You try not to stop. Just let whatever is happening, let it happen. But then I am a real advocate of them going back and really, really checking out what's going on and hunting through that pile of rubble to
Yeah,
try to find that one clue. There's going to be a clue in there that's going to want to be a song, and it's gonna, if you don't push it around too much, and you really just kind of hang with it, eventually it might just kind of tell you what it wants to be, and you just kind of dig it out, and brush it off, and find out what kind of song
Archaeology. It's archaeology.
it is. It is kind of archaeological, yeah.
Yeah, that's
And it's also, and archaeology is also hard work, and
yeah.
so,
Well, you mean
yeah.
you've been doing this for a long, long time. But like, let's just go back to the beginning. I come from a musical family, so it was kind of natural for me to go into music. We all kind of did music in the house. It was kind of something that that was just, there was gigs every night in our house, pretty much.
Cool.
Especially we got to our teens. There was music coming out of every room. What was your sort of childhood like, and what was the music like around at that time for you?
So we were a traveling family until I was 7, um, and I mean we just traveled nonstop. But when I was 7, we stopped in Oklahoma, and by then I'd picked up an accordion. I was a little 7-year-old accordion player,
Was it piano
and I don't,
accordion?
huh?
Was it piano accordion? Uh,
Yes,
yeah.
but it was one of the little guys with only
Oh
12
yeah.
buttons on the left
Yeah.
hand. And I'd only had it for a few weeks by the time we got to Oklahoma, but I was so enamored of the thing that I went ahead and stuck with it. Got a cool local man who was actually a sax player named Ray, and uh, and Ray gave me lessons for a few years until I eventually switched over to guitar. I was the only musician in the family.
Okay.
Uh, my mother was really, really good about bringing me records. She'd go down to the record shops and she'd talk to the kids that were working there, and she'd say, "Oh, all right, what's going on?" And man, she brought me great records growing up. And my father was back and forth to Vietnam all the time, and whenever he could, he'd score me some bizarro Japanese amplifier or something, and he'd get it back for me. And they were real supportive, um, thankfully so, and I've always been so grateful to them. My dad was never crazy about anything I did except for the music that I played. He was always really behind me on that. So I grew up playing in bands in high school, mostly rock and roll. Went off to Nashville in my very early 20s, and just was fortunate enough to find a publishing company that would let me hang around there and begin to learn about songwriting.
So you weren't writing songs before that. It was something that you kind of that. I suppose Nashville, it's the kind of the business, isn't there? Was it still when this is 1978? Is that right? You moved to Nashville. Was
Yeah.
it was it still like it is now today, known for that songwriting business? Was kind of was it as big an industry then as it is now?
Yes. Although in terms of, let's say, mechanical royalties, like record sales, country records back in those days didn't sell anything close to what pop records were selling. And so, a big, smash hit country record, if they sold 50,000 records or 100,000 records, that was really good. Um, so in that way, it probably wasn't as big. But on the other hand, the songwriting community was just a beehive, man. I mean, it was up and down Music Row. Was You could just hear it humming.
Yeah.
And
What was that like?
nowadays,
What was that like for a young 20 something to go in and
yeah,
be a part of that? Must have been so exciting.
it was bizarre and wonderful. Like I was really not a very good. Well, I wasn't a very good songwriter to begin with because I was just getting started. And I work with a lot of people who are like in their teens or early 20s who are way past where I was at that age. Um, but I liked at the time. I liked Appalachian music and bluegrass music, and John Prine and Tom Waits and Randy Newman and all those guys. um, all the others that we all know about. And I loved good songs. I grew up right down the road from Woody Guthrie, so I was really immersed in what Woody had done, um, and then walked into this publishing company in Nashville without really any idea about how to. Well, for one thing, country music back in those days was really for grown-ups. So a lot of the stuff that these guys were talking about in these songs, the records might have been really, really corny sounding, but they were grown up, man. They were talking about real stuff.
Yeah.
And I was too young to appreciate a lot of that. And really, the only country music I'd been hearing growing up as a little rock and roller was the stuff that would be playing on the radio in the kitchen when my mom would be cooking breakfast. And I didn't like most of it. And all of a sudden, I was in the very middle of one of the main publishing houses in the world that was responsible for writing those songs and putting out those records. And so I had to really hit the ground running. I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
That's a steep learning curve there, isn't it? I mean, to be amongst all that and think, and it's actually kind of the opposite of what we are taught today about kind of like the pop scene. Is like once you're in your early 20s, you're almost past it, whereas you kind of you were going into a situation where you were too young for it, which is kind of an odd situation for. It's like you have to earn your stripes. You have to actually have some life experience to write, which makes sense, really. You think the best songs have some substance to them, have some experience in them, really. And but we're sort of taught now, unless you're, in the pop industry, certainly, that if you get out your teens, then you're an old man. So
Yeah.
must have been quite nice to sort of realize that you're getting in somewhere where you're not pressured to be brilliant straight away. You've got a way to go and a way to learn, and the people around you to do that, I suppose. So how did you go about writing your first few songs and getting your first few songs away? What was that process like?
The first couple of years that I was involved with these guys, the publishing company was called Tree Publishing, and there were guys there like, legendary songwriters, Harlan Howard, Curly Putman, Bobby Braddock, Hank Cochran. A lot of these names may not mean much to a lot of your viewers, but these were like cornerstone, country songwriters. Some of the guys that sort of almost kind of defined um, what country music was all about in the say 60s, 70s, 80s. Um, these are the guys that were writing songs for Patsy Cline and um, um, well, just some of the main
Yeah,
biggest smash hits of the day. And these guys welcomed all the young guys like myself and the young ladies um, with truly open arms, and they didn't make us feel like dumbasses. And they really kind of took us under their wings and tried to help us along. Looking back on it, I don't really know why they even let me in the door, but they did. And I
yeah,
tried, and
that was going to be my next question, because it sort of seems like them letting a sort of a young man into the room is a bit like, it seems a bit counterproductive to their own ends, to their own. Is what's in it for them? To have more competition, but it seems like this idea of passing on the torch was quite an important thing, and that's great. I mean, that's so healthy for the business.
I don't think that they perceive me as being much of a threat, for one thing. And
I suppose.
I'll tell you an interesting lesson that I learned, and this is a really, really big lesson for me. I'd been for maybe a couple of years. I'd been really trying to figure out what they wanted me to write, and I was kept trying to write those songs, and I was just writing this almost invisible, uh, just just nothing. I was writing nothing. My songs would just kind of evaporate, and then finally one day, out of frustration, um, I just quietly, without telling anybody, I just kind of went off to myself and I wrote something just for myself, something that I liked, me. Whether they would, and I was, and I wrote it, and then I was really nervous about showing it to anybody. It was so hard to hang on to a publishing deal back in those days, and we were on a $100 a song draw, which means if you showed up and you had a song and they thought, yeah, we might, who knows, we might do something with that one of these days. Here's $100. And now, it wasn't like they were buying your song. They were giving you
Right.
$100 so that they could hang on to the publishing part of
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
Decided to. So we were really, really broke. And I wrote this song. I wasn't going to show it to anybody, but after a couple of days, man, I needed that $100 really bad. So I went on in and I just kind of held my breath and I showed them the song. We made a little guitar vocal demo of it. And about 2 days later, Roger Miller recorded that song. Now, Roger was everybody's hero. He was certainly one of my heroes. Any of your listeners who are familiar with that brilliant, beautiful maniac, there was never anybody, there never has been anybody like Roger Miller before or since. So all of a sudden, when I would walk past the veteran songwriters in the hallway, they kind of saw me,
Yeah, yeah.
But
You
the
got
lesson was to stop trying to write what I thought everybody else wanted me to write. Now, I didn't stick with that lesson as well as perhaps I might have over the years to come, because I kept trying to participate and cooperate and
yeah,
and keep my deal. We had kids we were raising. I was trying to pay the bills and all that. But it definitely knocked me left to center and kept me over there. And I think that might be one of the reasons why I was able to survive for so long, because I was kind of one of the kind of weirdos, and they needed a couple weirdos in the stable, and so they kind of kept me
everyone loves a
around.
weirdo.
Yeah.
That's good. So, what was it like hearing that first song? Do you remember hearing it on the radio or hearing it on record? What was your first time you heard Roger Miller's version of that song?
I went. They called me up, and I mean, you could have dropped me with a feather, and I went down and to the I went down to a tree and sat down, and they put on the reel-to-reel tape and you know and played it for me, and it was just gorgeous. Um, and that song was released as a single prior to the release of the album. And back in those days, if you released a single and it didn't become a hit, they just would kind of drop it. They'd put it over to the side. And I don't even know how high it got in the charts, but it didn't get that high in the charts. It might have been top 20 or something. So the ensuing album that came out didn't have that song on it.
Oh no!
But then in later years, I became friends with Waylon Jennings, and one day, must have been, gosh, I don't know, must have been early '90s, somewhere around in there. I got a phone call from Waylon Jennings, and he said, "Haas, you're not going to believe what we just did," because he actually did call people Haas. um, I said, "What'd you do?" And he said, "We wanted to. Roger had just died, and he said, Roger had just died, and we wanted to, with the Highwaymen, him and Willie and Christopherson and Cash."
Wow.
And he said, "Well, we wanted to record a Roger song, kind of in tribute to him, but we didn't want to do one of the main ones. We wanted to do something kind of obscure and cool." And we remembered that Roger played us this song late one night when we were sitting around a hotel room together. And so we found it and we cut it. And then as we were listening back, somebody walked through the room and they said, "Guys, that's not a Roger Miller song. Kevin Welch wrote that song." And so they just cracked Waylon up. And so anyway, as a result of that one moment where I decided just to kind of follow my own heart and write something that I liked, I ended up with Roger Miller, Waylon Jennings, Johnny Cash, Chris Christopherson, Willie Nelson. Later on, it was cut by oh, I can't even remember right now. But it's extraordinary, and it was just. It
That's
didn't make me
crazy.
any money. I mean, I didn't make any money off the deal, but I learned a huge lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's just. I mean, the fact that Roger Miller played that song to them late one night shows how much he thought of that song, and that little part of the story even has got to be a real like validation. It's gonna be like, well, he's obviously, even though it didn't end up on ensuing albums and it didn't end up being maybe as well known as it could have done, but for him to have been so proud of it, to have played it to those guys, and then that's how they heard it. That's got to be a massive little pat on the back for you. So
Yeah.
fantastic, brilliant. Okay, well, you look at some of the names that have recorded your songs over the years. I mean, Ricky Skaggs, Waylon Jennings, Garth Brooks, Trisha Yearwood, Don Williams. I mean, I mean, these some of the biggest names in the business. Um, what's it been like? Did you ever got to know these people, or what was it like, sort of hearing your songs being taken up by these people and getting them out there? And that's it's got to be a massive. Got to be really proud of that.
Well, yeah, it's it always feels like it's rare that somebody records one of your songs. I think any songwriter would say the same. I mean, now and then there'll be, one or two people who just hit a streak where every week, no matter what they write, it's just getting cut. And so, but that's extremely rare. And there are only a few of those. And most of the guys that are just down in the trenches, like I was for so many years, you just slug it out, all the time. And if, you get maybe 3 or 4 things recorded in a year, you're doing really, pretty well. And yeah, I got to know a lot of those people over the years, and a lot of them I didn't get to know. Perhaps met them, ran into them a few times. Some of the records you like, and some of them you don't. The ones where the artists who they really tried to make that song their own. Those are the ones that you liked. The
Yeah.
ones that you don't like, that I wouldn't like, were the ones where it sounded like the lyrics were sitting on a music stand, and they're standing in front of a microphone with the headphones on, and they're just essentially reading it. They don't know what the hell the song's about, or who the character is, or those
And
are
you can
not
tell
so.
the difference. You can tell the difference between those.
Um,
Yeah.
it kind of feels like you're looking at one of your kids, sort of, at the coroner's office. There's just no life in them.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, they're going to do the song, much better than I've ever done. And so they breathe, they bring their own muscles and power and sophistication and chops and all that stuff to the piece that I just don't have. So like this Chris Stapleton cut from last year, when Chris recorded Millionaire, somebody sent me a like an iPhone video thing in some giant stadium somewhere of them doing that song, and it sounded like one of those giant arena songs, and I thought it sounded fantastic and
Yeah.
totally different from the way I do it or would ever be able to do it. So what Chris was able to bring to that song was just just kind of extraordinary to
His
me.
voice is crazy good. I mean, I've actually sung that song as well because
Thank you.
um, my friend got married last year over in
Mm.
Ireland in a beautiful setting down in Cork, sort of middle of nowhere, beautiful bay. Like a proper what you'd idyllic kind of what you'd expect Ireland to look like. This kind of beautiful
Yeah,
little
exactly.
town and everything. And that was one of the songs I sang during their ceremony, and that was one of the songs that they wanted me to
Yeah.
sing. And it was obviously listening to the Chris Stapleton version. I'm like, man, how am I going to do this? Because what he makes, it's just such a huge performance, and I don't know, he's just something. He's just an amazing artist. I think he's just someone that's just so technically brilliant. And but yeah, so that was it was a brilliant song. I was trying to ring my friend this morning to say I was talking to you this morning
Oh, great.
because he's a big fan of country music, so he's going to open my eyes to a lot of good stuff. So no,
Good.
it's a fantastic song. So that was um, so that was your album Millionaire was recorded partly in Denmark and partly in Nashville. Is that right? With the Danes. What tell us a little bit about that?
So I started going to Denmark. I can't remember what year it was, but I went to take part in an event called Song Island on this beautiful island called Samso. Um, and it was mostly Scandinavian songwriters, but it was also people from the UK and from the States. And I kind of started doing this every year and got to know these people more and more and became really intrigued by. I started visiting studios and just checking out engineers and how they were working and what kind of gear they were using, and noticed a bunch of stuff that I was really, really intrigued by and liked. Um, the the engineers that I met there were generally really fearless. They were all using, Denmark is a lot of real cutting edge tech comes out of that area, and these guys managed to use that really high tech stuff in really low tech ways. And I I was I was really interested in this, and just met some great musicians there. And the record before Millionaire, I had recorded 3 songs one night in Copenhagen, just kind of in the middle of the night in this old studio in Copenhagen that had so much bleed you could hear the bass guitar out in the street. It was this big, soft, funky, leaky uh, room with an engineer named Tice who had dreads down to his ankles, and all we did was jam. And I ended up with 3 tracks of songs that I hadn't written yet. I wrote the songs in the vocal booth. Now I'd never done that
Oh,
before. I
yeah.
know a lot of people do that. They go in the studio and they write their record. I I will never do that. I've never been able to do that. But just because of the I don't know, the environment, the opportunities that were there that night, I ended up with 3 new songs recorded that went on the record, which is called Beneath My Wheels.
Yeah.
So I said, all right, next record, I'm coming back to Denmark. And I brought those guys to the States for some of it. And we cut in Nashville. It was one of the nicest bands I've ever been in.
So there's that thing, isn't it? That's that phenomenon of like a place can have something inexplicable and immeasurable coming out of it, and it's always any kind of gig or anything is a kind of a it's a back and forth with the audience. You can get that with rooms sometimes, can't you? With a kind of an
Yeah,
environment around you and whatever it is brought out a
whatever it
completely
is.
different
Yeah,
side to you. We just done a. It's one of those. There's maybe some ghosts in there that are helping you along or something. You don't know what it is, but it's that's an amazing experience. Yeah, I had a similar experience with my band. We wrote a song, kind of. We went in there to jam and ended up with a song, and we couldn't recreate the vibe of what we recorded that night. We just kind
yeah,
of doctored it and put it on the record as it
yeah,
was, which was a
yeah.
nightmare for the engineer. That we presented this sort of half baked idea to make that a thing, you know. But
No, it's a real thing, isn't it? That a
yeah,
lot of times you cannot beat the demo.
yeah,
You can't even get back and get close to the groove or whatever on the demo. Um, I missed a Dixie Chicks cut one time on their first record, their very first record, which went on to sell like I don't know 12 million records or something. but there was a song of mine that they had been playing before they got signed. It was the demo of that song that got them signed,
Huh?
apparently, that got them that record deal. So when it came time to re-record the song, they just couldn't. Now this is just the way the story's been told to me. They couldn't beat the demo, and so it didn't go on that record.
Oh no! Just put the demo on then. Put the demo on. It's fine.
And that's the thing. I think that nowadays, I think that that's what would happen. Is you
Yeah.
just figure out, well, just master it a certain way, get it on there. But back then, all the engineers in Nashville were still really pretty. They were wrapped really tight, you know, and it was hard to get those guys just to kind of loosen up.
Yeah.
Um, I mean,
Uh,
fantastic engineers, you know, but you couldn't have talked them into putting a demo on a master recording.
well, I actually wanted to roll back a little bit to the Dead Reckoning Records being formed, because that was you'd released an album before that, with a label, and then you sort of formed your own. Was it or co-founded it? Was it just literally a bunch of musicians thinking we need our own vehicle here, something we can control and do things in the right way, or do things in the way that we want to do it?
Yeah.
How did that come about? What were the conversations that kind of led to it, and how did you find running that?
Yeah, we ran it. We ran it like a bunch of musicians would run a business, which is basically into the ground. You know, we were not good at that part of it, but man, did we have fun. Um, all right, so in a nutshell, I was on Warner Reprise at the time. I'd made 2 records for those guys. Loved them. That was a great company, but you know, it wasn't going to work. They wanted me to do a 3rd record, but they wanted to be involved in it, and I don't blame them. But I didn't want to do that. I was real headstrong at the time, and I just didn't want anybody messing with me at all.
Yeah,
So I asked to be released. They released me. Um, I had a band back in those days that included Kieran Kane,
yeah,
who was also making his own records and had made 1,000,000 records, great ones. Mike Henderson, who is one of the all-star guitar players in Nashville, has been for many years. Glenn Worf, Tammy Rogers, Harry Stinson, the drummer from the Dukes, the original Steve Earle and the Dukes band. All these guys, they'd all been playing sort of as my band, and also, they all had their own stuff going on. And we all kind of came out of our record deals at the same time. I think Henderson left RCA, Kieran left CBS, I left Warner Reprise. And normally, what you would do is you would just you'd go across the street and you'd try to get another deal at one of the other labels. It was just that sort of musical chairs.
yeah,
And none of us really wanted to do that. And I thought about maybe trying to go to Rounder or some indie, just get away from the Nashville thing. But then Kieran, it's getting dark. Can you still see me?
yeah. I can see. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, great, perfect. Darker the better, actually. It was Kieran Kane who had the idea to, and nobody was doing this in Nashville. Nobody had ever done it except Prine. John Prine had his own label
Yeah,
um, with his business partner Al, and but that was that. This was like a bunch of musicians and songwriters coming together. We had no money, um, and we just decided, look, we'll just all play on each other's records. Um, Whenever we make a record for one of these major labels, they always hire an indie publicist, indie promoter, indie what have you. They always augment their in-house staff anyway. Why
yeah,
don't we just we'll scrape up some money and we'll hire those indie people. And this is before the Americana label, I mean, the Americana genre started. And so, I mean, we were really out on our own. What we had going for us was CMT at the time. They were independently owned, and we'd make these videos, and take them out there, and they would play the hell out of our videos. So we weren't selling a ton of records or anything, but we were able to justify what we were doing. And then we would all tour together as one giant band.
Wow.
And we'd take turns stepping up to the mic. You know, you'd get up, you'd sing your song, you'd go back, and then you'd be the guitar player or the drummer or whatever for the next person. And it was called, we were just called the Dead Reckoners, for want of a better idea. And the show was called A Night of Reckoning. And it was
Brilliant.
it was such a I was the worst guy on stage. I was surrounded by Fats Kaplan came and joined us.
Yeah.
Allison Prestwood stepped in as our bass player for many years, and it was just such an extraordinary band. There was nothing that they couldn't do.
That must
So
be
we had a
so.
blast.
I mean, you had obviously full artistic control over everything you did, a full artistic freedom, and then to go out and tour together. It must be
Yeah,
just so much because there's not all the pressure on one guy, is it? You've all kind of, you're all kind of sharing that burden, and the gigs must have just been so much fun.
yeah, yeah. Particularly kind of when we started qualifying for some of the larger festivals, um, and it was a really good festival stage band, I have to say. I was always so proud to take the stage with those guys.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we did that for a while. I think we ended up with 20 or 25 really nice CDs in that catalog. Their label, Dead Reckoning Records, still exists. It's pretty much a holding company for those CDs. And whenever Kieran puts out a record, he says it's a Dead Reckoning record. And whenever I put out a record, I say it's a Dead Reckoning record. And that's about as much as I understand about our current state. But um, it was a wonderful adventure. I don't even know
Yeah.
how many years it lasted. I think 10. I put out a record last year that was called The Dead Reckoning Years,
Yeah, I
and
saw
it
that. Yeah.
essentially was, I kind of cherry picked stuff from 95 to 2005. And
Yeah.
I sat down and listened to it when I've got I initially just made it as an LP, and I finally got off the road and I had the LP and I put it on a record player, dropped the needle on it, and first of all, I was really knocked out by the way it sounded because we were really careful about the mastering of this thing and the manufacturing. Um, but what I hadn't expected was that I realized that I really liked the collection of songs, and I liked the way
I was
they
gonna
all
s-
went together.
gonna say it sounds like it sounds like an album, like that was
Oh,
made.
yeah. Mm.
It sounds like a one piece of work, doesn't it?
I was shocked, man. I hadn't expected to like it. I was just hoping to like the way it sounded, sonically. And I went, well, goddamn, that's pretty good. I'm not as horrible as I always think.
Always your own worst critic. But it shows that obviously you had a kind of philosophy that surrounded that whole Dead Reckoning, for want of a better word, project. I hate the word project, but obviously you had an overarching philosophy that kind of obviously seeped into the music across all those years as those different records. There was obviously a
Yeah,
kind of a certain philosophy that worked
yeah.
as a
Well, we
body of
always
work.
try to, we always cut live and try to keep the overdubs to a bare minimum. And for me, that's important because I'm not very good at overdubbing vocals, like going in and singing to tracks. I'm not very good at that. So the only way I stand a chance is if I'm playing and singing at the same time. And pretty much we're trying to catch the solos, as we go. And we will 99% of the time we'll overdub background vocals. But Karen and Fats and I made 3 records
I was going to
together.
ask you about these. Yeah, I can ask you about
Those are
these.
fascinating, man, because we would sit around in a tight circle. A lot of times we wouldn't even wear headphones, and it was just miking. And we would sometimes come back in after the 3 of us played, and Kieran would bang on the back of his bouzouki or or you would add a little percussion perhaps, but that was about it. Sometimes we would actually do the the second part, the harmony part, as we were cutting. It was just a really interesting way to cut, and because there was so much bleed in that tight little circle, it almost had a surround sound thing that happened. Everything was in everything else, you know.
Yeah.
And we'd start and finish. All three of those records took 3 days apiece. From, I mean, from, there was no pre-production other than, you got any songs? Yeah, I got some songs. You got any songs? Yeah, I got a few. And that was pre-production. And then we'd sit down and we'd be finished mixing by the end of the third day. All three of those
Wow.
records. And I really like those records. And my favorite one is called Lost John Dean. And interest fact that when I go out as a solo artist, I don't play any of my songs from Lost John Dean, which means that that's my favorite record of the three we did. And it's all because of Karen's songs that make that record so extraordinarily interesting to me. Somebody said, this record, it doesn't just groove, it kind of like rattles. It's got this rattle to it.
Yeah.
And it's just Kieran, man. He's just such a groove monkey, and Fats, is ridiculous. And I'm just hanging on and having a blast. So.
Yeah, they're great records. I have to say, I listen to them, but there's fantastic. I mean, if that's just, looking back on your career, you've just kind of seems like you've just done things the way you wanted to do them, done things in the way that was fun, done things in a way that was inspiring to you, and that's got to be a great way to look back and think, you know what, this was it was a real blast, you didn't. I always, because that's it really intrigued me. There, you're talking about recording vocals, because it's the one thing that I hate doing, going back in and then redoing the real vocal over a track that's done.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking might rethink how I do things and just do things as live as possible and
try it, man.
try and capture that vibe.
Like sometimes the engineer might get a little spooked because they're afraid that they're going to have too much of your guitar or whatever in the vocal mic, and vice versa.
Yeah.
But if you can just talk to them and talk them into just dealing with that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not
what you get.
That's not your problem. That sounds like a you problem. You got to deal with it. It's the way I want to do things. But the thing is, it's. Are you going to go for absolute clean mic sounds, no bleed, or the performance and the vibe have to be the foremost, isn't it? That's what people listen. No one listens to a record as a music listener who's not a musician and goes, do you know what, that the mic there is a brilliant microphone used on that, or no one's thinking that. It's about the performance and how that song connects, and making that the focal point.
Well, like Kieran said one time, a record sounds like it sounds, period. And nobody says that every record's got to sound the same, or that every acoustic guitar's got to sound the same, or vocal, whatever. You think about some of our favorite records, and they sound vastly different from each other. And, they just sound however they sound. As long as you're getting the juice on there, then I swear to God, that's all that matters. That's the main thing anyway.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, you should try it.
Absolutely. I'm going to be a nightmare for my engineer now. He's going to be cursing your name. Yeah. I'm now going to ask you to pick a favorite child. Not literally, because you actually do have performing children, but for looking back on your records, what's your sort of proudest moment, you think, over in terms of a record? What do you look back and feel? Which one would you pick out?
You mean like one track?
Or even I was going to ask you about, just to pick one album I was going to ask you about, but go on, if you want to go hone down to a track, that's cool.
Gosh, I don't know, man. I do like a lot of the stuff on the Millionaire record. I like a lot of the stuff on the Dead Reckoning. Beneath My Wheels. I like the last record I did, Dust Devil.
Dust Devil, yeah.
I went back to Nashville last year, or a couple of years ago, and gathered up all those old cats, and we made a record together. And gosh, I don't even know what to tell you, man. I don't know.
What was that recording like then, Golden? Just we'll go with that one. What was that? What was that? What was it like making that record with all those?
Well, it was
Going back.
wonderful because like I left Nashville like 10 or 12 years ago to kind of flee to this log house out in the woods, and I didn't go back to Nashville for a long time, and I missed my friends, and I really missed the level of musicianship that my friends could bring, and I missed the studios, and I missed the engineers, and I just wanted to go back and get everybody back together and enjoy that, and it was such a blast, man. It was such a rich experience. Um, so I was just in heaven
Yeah.
the whole time. We cut maybe for we took a while. We took 4 or 5 days, and but there's a lot of stuff on that record that I really like. But actually, I haven't heard it for a while, so I don't want to tell you anything. I like the title track, Dust Devil, because
Yeah.
I like that song a lot. It means a lot to me. I like the title tracks now that I think of it, of Beneath My Wheels and Millionaire. I like an old recording called Early Summer Rain from the second record I made for Warner Brothers, because we discovered a lot about what we were going to be doing for the next 20 years when we recorded that song.
Yeah. That was a kind of it opened a door for you.
And I dug a lot of the stuff that I got to do with Karen and Fats on those little trio records. But
yeah, what was it like? You collaborated with your children, Dustin and Savannah. What was that? Must have been a real proud moment to be playing with them.
well, yeah, like Savannah is an actress, and but she's also a musician. She had a really cool band called the Trishas
Yeah,
in Austin for a few years. They were just an exceptionally interesting band, all women. Um, re- yeah, just a really interesting band. That was a great period. But that was really the only time she really devoted most of her time to music. She's in Toronto right now. She's playing the role of Barbara. What's the Batman? Um, the daughter of the police commissioner from Gotham, Barbara Gordon.
oh, I don't know.
So
Oh,
it's a
okay.
show called Titans, and so Savannah is, because Vanny lost her right leg a few years ago in this bizarre uh, accident where she was hit by a car, and so Barbara Gordon is this character who's in a wheelchair, and so Savannah said, okay, I'm not in a wheelchair, but I guess they just needed somebody with some kind of weird leg action. So anyway, he's up there right now filming that, and my
Wow.
son Dustin has made 3 really intense, interesting records. That it's like a triad, sort of a trilogy. And he devotes most of his time right now to an organization that he started called Soldier Songs and Voices, where it's a nonprofit that he started 10 or 12 years ago, and they supply musical instruments to veterans, to combat veterans, and free music lessons and songwriting lessons, and they provide them with these weekly get-togethers with other men and women, and there's a lot of PTS going on, and
Yeah,
this serves as medicine, and it's been extraordinary watching what's happened uh, for a lot of these people as they get involved in music for one thing, and because that's an actual healing thing. There's nothing you know sparkly about that. That's a real true thing. It's a reparative
Yeah.
exercise.
Yeah.
And so watching what's happened for so many people through Soldier Songs and Voices has been extraordinary. He's got chapters now all over the country, and
That's a
that's going
fantastic
really
thing.
strong.
That's a fantastic thing. I think artists are all kind of lucky in a way that we have a kind of a way of expressing anything that bad thing that happens to us, any good thing, anything that happens that affects us emotionally tends to come out through the music, and it's such a great conduit for all of that stuff, and it's therapy, you know. So to for them to have an artistic outlet for obviously the horrific the things that they've seen and done, um, it's a fantastic uh, noble cause, and that's a brilliant thing to be doing. And you know,
And it turns out that it's not that hard to get it started in your area. This should be happening, and you guys have got plenty of people who've been through this.
absolutely,
Same in Australia. We've been kind of trying to get. There are people who are trying to get the same organization going down here, in line with some other organizations that are already up and running down here in Australia. But man, it's whoa! I've seen lives changed. People get off their meds. People stop having night sweats, and their short term memory begins returning. It's incredible.
that's
So
brilliant.
anyway, that's what Dustin's doing, and mostly, and just like everybody else, no, we're none of us are gigging,
Yeah,
so we're all kind of hanging at the house, cooking, doing a lot of cooking.
a lot of cooking, a lot of eating.
Yeah.
So the what's next for you now? You've got these new songs you've been writing that you've written during the lockdown period. Are we going to see that? Are they seeing the light of day next year sometime soon, or what's happening with those?
Yeah, I really honestly, I have no plans whatsoever for him. I would like to. I've got maybe 3 or 4 or 5 other songs that are just kind of up on the workbench right now. If I can get those finished, I would like to, um, recommence with this remote recording.
Yeah,
Um, it just kind of. Oh, another cool thing is we found these lost tapes from 1994. We've talked about Dead Reckoning and that band that became Dead Reckoning Records.
yeah.
About a year before we made that label, I decided I wanted to make a live record at the Bluebird Cafe in Nashville, and so we went in with all the reckoners for 3 nights, and Emmylou Harris's husband, Brian Ahern, back in those days or he was ex-husband, I guess, by then, but he had a remote recording truck, uh, kind of the coolest one in town, and we pulled Brian's truck up outside the Bluebird and recorded for 3 nights, and then never released it.
Oh wow.
And I, uh, at David Abeda's urging, I finally went to my storage facility and I dug those tapes out, absolutely sure that by now, they'd be toast,
Yeah.
but everything was still on them.
Wow.
And
Ha.
so
What was
we've
that like
been,
hearing that back?
it was weird and really cool. It was, um, yeah. At the time I was calling us the Rough Sextet because we were completely unrehearsed and just winging it all the time. And so it was just everybody just listening and playing together, and it was music. And Abeda's been able to recover this stuff, and so anyway, at some point we'll get that out there, and I don't
That
know,
sounds
man.
brilliant. Yeah. Well, the thing is, there's like all bets are off now, aren't they? There's no rules. There's like, it seems like, well, and not that the rules seem to have applied to you at all over the years. You seem to have done whatever you wanted to do, which is fantastic freedom to have, you know. So, but I think there's a lot of rare things people are seeing because no one's really had a lot of chance to do anything kind of new in the normal way. So everything's different. So why not? I mean, let's hear it. It sounds like it's going to be fantastic to hear that. So
Yeah, in a real odd way, I think it's been really there are good things that have come out of this
I think
bizarre
so.
year
I
for
think
people.
so. Yeah,
Shook
people
us
have
all up.
had to look at things in a different way. Maybe everyone kind of got into sort of routines and ways of doing things, which have kind of had to have been interrupted and arrested. So maybe that's a. So you
Yeah.
feel like 2021 is going to be the most interesting in terms of releases and artistic expression. I don't know.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's going to be a lot of depressive lockdown songs, but there's going to be a lot of also inspirational things coming out and new things. So yeah, maybe it's
Hope
a
so.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Well, I'm just going to one last thing. Would ask you about a recommendation. We always ask for recommendation on the show for someone that an artist or a band that either is kind of people may not know but they need to know, or maybe it's someone that's kind of inspired you over the years that you want to say to people, check this person out. Whichever way you want to take it, it's up to you. But who do people need to know?
Oh man, I wish you'd given me a little time to run up to that because there's so many. Um, um, Earlier this year, we lost a friend of all of ours named David Olney. And Olney was a giant of a songwriter. Townes Van Zandt called him our Bach or something like that.
Yeah.
Olney was truly a giant, and he was sitting on a stage at a festival in Florida in January of this year, sitting in a chair with two other writers on stage with him, and he began a song, and he played a couple bars of the intro, and then he stopped, and he said, "I'm sorry," and then he put his head down, and he died.
Wow.
And he didn't fall out of the chair. He didn't drop his guitar. It just clicked off. And so I I think that all of us who grew up kind of on the alt side of Nashville would say that we have all learned a ton from Dave's work over the years. So I would always recommend if somebody's interested in songs, um, go listen to Dave Olney. It's Olney.
Fantastic. We'll put a link to some stuff where people can go and check his work out. Thank you so much. I know it's run over what was the agreed time and what we normally do, but it's been so fascinating talking to you. And I'd like to sort of keep in touch, and maybe we'll do a songwriting session at some point. I'd really
Absolutely.
love to get you to pick my brains and see what's in there, because maybe there's things I don't know about that you can draw out. But listen, thank you
Sure.
so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It's been a real honor, and thank you, Kevin Welch. Thank you. Stay safe and stay well,
And
and
you.
uh, and I look forward to hearing the wish list lockdown album and the lost live tapes too. I'm looking forward to hearing all
Yeah,
that
man.
stuff.